In my previous life, in order to repay the boss's kindness, I rushed into the factory. My son has a high fever of 41 degrees, and I have been designing drawings in the factory all night. My father is seriously ill and wants to see me for the last time. I'm so drunk that I'm blocking alcohol from my boss. 3. His wife was separated, and finally he got liver cancer and was dying in the hospital bed. The boss only said lightly, "Mr. Luo is about to fail. Have you found someone to replace him?" That are right, no matter how much I do, I'm just a screw. I won't do the stupid things that work hard for the capitalists anymore. 1. When I opened my eyes, I found that the boss was staring at me. "Mr. Luo, it's working time now. Why did you fall asleep?" I remembered that the boss suddenly called me that night and asked me to study the machine drawings. That I climbed up and down the machine with the toolbox in my arms and worked overtime until 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. I got home at 4 o'clock and went to bed at 4:30. I came to work again at 7:30. It's strange that I'm not sleepy. The boss smiled and patted me on the shoulder. Luo Gong has always been a model in the factory and a leader. He has always abided by labor discipline. This disciplinary violation will be fined 200 yuan according to the regulations. Is that okay? It's exactly the same as what I said in my previous life. I joined this factory when I was 17 years old. I have been in the factory for 20 years and have always regarded this place as my home. No matter how strict the rules and regulations are, they are also the first to take the lead in supporting and never violate discipline by example. The boss's phone was set as an emergency call by me, and he paid attention to it 24 hours a day and was on standby in real time 365 days a year. As long as the boss calls, I will immediately go to the factory to deal with the problem. But in this way, I tried my best and didn't get any benefits in the end. In the eyes of the boss, I am just a consumable. When I am old, my body can't survive, so naturally I should be abandoned. When he was seriously ill, he only came once. After listening to the doctor's instructions, after finding out that I couldn't work, I immediately asked someone to replace me. You have to be under the age of 30, preferably in other places. But if you buy a house locally and have a mortgage, you can drag your family with your family. It was only at that time that I realized that the boss had always wanted someone who could be a cow and a horse and squeeze wantonly. As for who and what his name is, it doesn't matter to him. Then why should I die for him? The boss signaled the finance department to collect my fine. I nodded. There is no problem with the fine, but according to the factory rules, I worked overtime for 4 hours last night. Should it be calculated as overtime pay normally? I used to regard overtime as an internal matter, and I never took the initiative to raise the question of overtime. I didn't know that I didn't care about these things. The boss treated me as a fool. I must fight for my own interests this time. The boss didn't expect that I suddenly fought for this, which was a little embarrassing. Everyone in the workshop was watching, and he had to pretend to wave his hand. It was hard for Luo Gong to rush out the drawings last night. It's forgive to be sleepy in the morning. I'm in charge of this matter, that's it. The boss said something. Who dares to say no? This factory was originally calculated by him alone. It is not a day or two for the system to be changed overnight. After staying for so many years, I know very well that there are many problems in the factory. The frontline workers are in gangs, and their work efficiency is extremely low. The phenomenon of rebates in the purchasing department is common. The machines that should be eliminated are not eliminated, and many of the new machines purchased back are already defective. The products produced have repeatedly failed to meet the standard. The docking sales department has complained to me many times, saying that many customers have problems and are unwilling to adopt our products again. The reason why it has not closed down is that the factory has occupied the dividends of the times and started relatively early. The second reason is that I am a fool. As a technical backbone, with a salary of less than 10,000 yuan, he works overtime every day and fights hard on the front line. This time, I'm going to lie flat and see when this downhill broken ship will close down. 2. I sat back on the workst, and my apprentice Xiao Yang took the initiative to lean over, feeling a little worried. "Mr. Luo, how dare you talk back to the boss? What if he fires you?" I narrowed my eyes. Unlike me, I entered the factory after graduating from vocational high school. Xiao Yang is a graduate student who graduated from 985 school, and the boss values him very much. He is obviously just an apprentice who can't do anything, but the salary given to him is twice that of me as a technical backbone. In my previous life, I had a low education, and I naturally admired this talented student, that he devoted himself to this young apprentice, and devoted himself to the professor. Unexpectedly, he turned his head and said bad things about me in front of the boss, provoking a breakup. Mr. Luo has stayed in the factory for too long. In his eyes, The factory is already his own property, and he is the boss. Later, he learned all my skills and found that my body was in trouble. So he actually asked his boss to fire me. This kind of person must not be let go. I said lightly. No, the boss knows that my mind is for the good of the factory. My good colleague sent me a screenshot that night. It was sent by Xiao Yang in the circle of friends, and the group blocked me. The question of Xiaobai. What should I do if there is a conflict between the direct leader and the boss? The picture is a selfie of breakfast in his factory, and a fried dough stick in his hand is particularly eye-catching. Everyone knew that he was my apprentice, and my colleague kindly reminded me. This apprentice seems to be an yin and yang. You are an old fried dough stick. Be careful. Of course I know. After Xiao Yang posted this circle of friends, the boss will ask him about the specific situation the next day. He took the opportunity to say in front of the boss that I had a problem with the rules and regulations of the factory. In private, he often complained that the boss was an iron rooster. He only knew how to deduct money and didn't know how to raise wages. I also want to take advantage of the long-term stay in the factory to encourage everyone to make suggestions and reformulate more relaxed rules and regulations. The boss was already afraid that I had been in the factory for a long time, afraid that my prestige was higher than his, and he was more dissatisfied with me. He asked me to come forward and find an excuse to demote several colleagues who usually have a good relationship with me. However, I was ignorant of these before and faithfully carried out the boss's orders. He offended everyone for no reason, but was isolated instead. Xiao Yang is still too anxious. I didn't have an internal volume this time. I just took the initiative to calculate the overtime pay. Colleagues all stood on my side and took screenshots of his yin and yang in my circle of friends. I had better do it first and stood up before the boss called Xiao Yang. Boss, I have something important to tell you. Xiao Yang has a high education, but basically has zero practical experience. Less than a month after entering the factory, he has broken 3 equipment worth more than 100,000 yuan. I helped him hide it before. I reported it truthfully, and the boss was furious. High score and low ability, what kind of talent? I hired him with a high salary, just at this level. Xiao Yang said something right. The boss is indeed an iron rooster, who only cares about coming in and out. The equipment maintenance of more than 100,000 yuan needs to replace a lot of parts, coupled with the loss of work stoppage. Tens of thousands of yuan has to be added before and after. No matter how highly educated you are, you can flatter, but you can't compete with the loss of real money. Xiao Yang was fired on the spot. The probationary period has not passed, and he doesn't need to pay much compensation. When the young man received the news, he cried loudly. I haven't been severely beaten by society, and it's not enough to know how to play tricks in the workplace. I don't sympathize with him at all, because I know that I am also in trouble. Mr. Luo, why didn't you report that he destroyed the machine in time? The boss looked at me with a sense of inquiry. How many things are you hiding from me? Is the surname of this factory Luo or Chen? 3. The reason why I don't say it is not purely to be a bad person. It's because the damage to the machine is not entirely Xiao Yang's responsibility. The equipment bought by the purchasing department was also a little problematic. In addition, the frontline workers were inefficient, and they could make do with broken machines. If you change to a new good machine, the manual will not be able to keep up. But I won't tell the boss about these. I will only admit my mistake sincerely. I'm sorry, boss. I'm hiding it just because I saw that the child was still young. Not a few years older than me when I entered the factory. It's not easy. When I entered the factory at the age of 17, the boss was not a real boss. There is only one employee like me under him, and even a small workshop can't be called. Xiao Luo, we are all doing well. When the factory opens, you will be my partner, and we are brothers. For the sake of the factory, I went to other places to learn art. Don't be afraid of being dirty or tired, groping and rolling in the machine. Finally, I learned the most cutting-edge drawing and machine operation. The factory received the order and really started to open. There are more and more employees. At the peak, there were hundreds of employees, but we didn't become brothers. He changed from Lao Chen to the boss, and I changed from Xiaoluo to Luogong. The boss narrowed his eyes and said something. People don't always lie on the credit book of the past. Knock on me, I just think I don't understand. The boss's first trouble is coming soon. Just a moment after I got off work, I was sitting in the car and received a call from my boss. Slipping my finger, I hung up the phone and dragged it into the blacklist. Step on the accelerator and go away. Today is the day when the boss receives a temporary request from the customer to redraw a certain product drawing. But it has nothing to do with me. I stepped on the accelerator to the end, and I was getting faster and faster. Today in my previous life, I didn't go home to draw drawings. My son had a fever of 41 degrees in the middle of the night, because he was not sent to the hospital in time, leaving serious sequelae. In despair, my wife proposed to divorce me. I don't want to experience the ending of my wife's separation again. I rushed home, and my wife's eyes were already red. Luo Junhong, do you know that you have a family? My son has such a serious flu, and you haven't come home for several days. Woohoo! I didn't refute and hugged her. It's all my fault. I won't do this again. Dressing her, I picked up my son and got back into the car. My wife has been taking care of her son for several days, and she is so tired that she can't open her eyes. I was heartbroken and vowed to protect my family for the rest of my life. In the emergency department of the hospital, my son fell asleep with an intravenous drip. My wife is a little worried. Are you okay if you get off work on time tonight? When I think of so many years, I have been off work at 5 o'clock, but I have been at ease. I usually have to patrol the factory until 9 o'clock before leaving, so I can't wait to blow my mouth a few times. It's okay. I've been in the factory for 20 years, and the boss won't fire me because of a little thing. I looked at the intercepted 99 plus harassing calls, and did nothing. I turned off the screen directly. If you fire me, you will lose more, only him. I normally go to work at 8:30. That I didn't panic. I got up early to take my son's temperature. After confirming that his fever subsided, I drove to work. When I arrived at the factory at 9:30, the boss sat on my workstation with a terribly gloomy face. A dismissal notice was placed on my desk. 4. I don't even move my eyelids. He still needs me, and it's impossible to fire me at this point. I just want to knock again. Without waiting for him to speak, I cried first. Boss, my son has had the flu and a high fever for several days. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't know that my mobile phone was out of power and turned off. Is there anything wrong with the factory? So many employees are watching, and the dark circles under my eyes and the haggard face are clearly put there. No matter how much reprimand, I can only swallow it back temporarily. The boss glared at me fiercely. Come to the office with me. As soon as the door was closed, he showed his true face. It's important that someone in the family is sick, but what about the factory? Isn't it more important? I can't contact you since 6 o'clock. Do you know how much damage this night has caused to the factory? 1. Of course I know. In the previous life, the tricky customer proposed to check the drawings of the new product. The factory is used to slicing down on labor and materials, and there is no preparation at all. It was me who stayed up all night for 4 hours to catch up with the emergency. The customer was reluctantly satisfied and signed a contract to continue cooperation with our factory. The factory got through the difficulties, but my son became a dement. I'm not here this time, and no one can make the drawings. It means that the loss of major customers and the capital chain begins to break. The boss patted the table and scolded me for leaving without permission and being irresponsible. You are the technical backbone of the factory, watching the factory develop to what it is today. What do you usually say? Have you done it to take the factory as your home? According to the factory regulations, you need to be fired in this case. But I know it's not easy for you to support your family, so deduct this month's salary first. There will be another time. Don't blame me for not remembering the old love. Such a double standard, I only think it's funny. 1. It's already time to get off work. Why do you leave without permission? When you work overtime, you are voluntary. If you are an hour late, you will be deducted the whole month's salary. 1. He changed his voice, softened his tone, and patted me on the shoulder. I am strict with you because our relationship is different from theirs. We are the people who know the factory best, and want the factory to develop well, right? Slap a sweet date, and see the strange coquettish operation. I was so pua by him in my previous life, and I was taken seriously. With a salary that has not been raised for more than 10 years, he consumes his body, and helps him guard the factory, without asking for anything in return. I nodded and pretended to be moved. Boss, it's my fault this time. I shouldn't just care about my son with a high fever, and leave aside the temporary tasks that only appear after work. The embarrassment on the boss's face flashed, and he changed the topic. That customer is a little difficult. I waited for a long time, and he decided to give us another chance. Here we go. The previous life was this hungman banquet. The customer does not sincerely want to cooperate with us at all, but intends to make a fool of us. I blocked the wine for the boss, drank and vomited twice on the spot, and was pulled back to the wine table in a daze to continue drinking. I was so drunk that no one sent me home. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the cold floor of the box, and my mobile phone was full of missed calls and messages. Luo Junhong, where have you been? Dad passed away in the early morning. I struggled to get up, and wanted to go to the hospital. I slipped on the vomit several times and stumbled out of the door in embarrassment. The boss is shaking hands with the customer with a smile on his face. What's wrong with you? I was almost seen by the customer. For the first time, I lost my posture and grabbed his clothes. My father is gone. The boss slapped my hand. Mr. Luo, it's normal for the old man to leave when he's old. Go to the hospital quickly. He did up his suit and smiled again. By the way, we have just cooperated with the customer. During the special period, the task is tight these days. Please focus more. Remember to be on duty on time tomorrow morning. 5. I came back to my senses and heard that the boss didn't mean to discuss with me, but was informing me. Follow me for tonight's banquet. I responded with a smile. Okay. In the next life, I finally see clearly who is the person who is really good to me. I won't do such a stupid thing as making a mess of my small family for something unworthy. In the familiar box, the customer poured a full cup and handed it over. The boss looked at me naturally. He is 2 years older than me and has a third-year-old man. His family has told me not to drink outside. In the past, I took the initiative to block the way, but today I just pretended not to see it and picked up the food by myself. The boss couldn't hold on his face and coughed lightly. Mr. Luo, I'm toasting. I was scared. Boss, don't you remember? I will be in charge of driving later, this. When I encountered this kind of thing before, the temporary driver has always been my apprentice Xiao Yang. He was fired early this time. The boss hasn't driven by himself for a long time. I can only be the driver. Thinking of this matter, the boss frowned and was about to speak. The wine glass has been delivered to your eyes. Boss Chen, don't you give me this face? I'm afraid we still need to cooperate. There is no I did it. The boss drank it all at once. Drinking the first thing to open is like a flood opening the flood. One cup after another, I can't count them. Between the staggered plans, I saw the boss's belly rising rapidly like a ball. He was soon vomited, and the wild king crab worth thousands of yuan vomited on the ground, which was just a pool of mud. The customer showed a look of disgust. The quality of the equipment made is poor. I didn't expect that even the amount of alcohol was almost boring. It's ugly. I helped the boss get into the car. It was already 10 o'clock. My father has a sudden illness. He should be on his way to the hospital now. He can't delay any longer. 1. The driver who was called by mobile phone early in the morning was waiting in the garage. I threw the drunk boss into the car and patted his ass and left. It has nothing to do with me as a migrant worker or not. That I drove directly to the hospital in my memory. My wife and mother just got off the ambulance. Your father slipped when he was taking a shower. We thought you were still working overtime. If it's not serious, we won't let you know. Why did you come here? My eyes were glued to the stretcher that was lifted down, and I said perfunctorily, I'm off work and just passed by. If you do it again, some endings will not change. Dad was sent to the emergency room. After a simple examination, the doctor quickly issued a critical illness notice. The patient had a cerebral hemorrhage after falling, and the situation was very serious. There is a high possibility that you won't wake up after the operation. Is your family here? We took turns to go in and saw Dad for the last time. He lay peacefully and didn't seem to be in pain. My mother cried and fainted in my arms. How can it be so serious? Your father is only in his 60s. My wife held my hand and said, it's good that you didn't work overtime for long today. At least you can see Dad for the last time. There are no regrets. I stared at the light lit outside the operating room and thought silently. The light turned off, and the doctor came out and shook his head, announcing the patient's death. I took a picture of the death notice, sent it directly to the personnel, and asked for 3 days of morning leave. I turned off my mobile phone and took 2 days to deal with my father's affairs according to customs. For the rest of the day, I accompanied my sad family and went through the difficulties together. The son was still young. He didn't know what it meant when his grandfather passed away. He threw himself into my arms happily. Dad, I haven't played with you for a long time. I picked him up and made a promise. In the future, Dad will spend a lot of time with you every day. My wife came in nervously and handed me her mobile phone. Junhong, it seems to be your boss. He called me. 6. As soon as the phone was connected, there was an unbearable swearing. I pressed the record button and put my mobile phone upside down on the table. While he was tired of scolding, he said lightly in the gap of the pause, I'll be right there. When I hung up the phone, my wife's eyes were already red. Junhong, it turns out that your job is not easy. No wonder you always have to work overtime. Sometimes I don't understand you. Why don't we stop doing it? I knew that she cared about me, and my heart was warm. Don't worry, I have my own plans. As soon as I entered the factory, I found that today's atmosphere was unprecedentedly solemn. The machine did not work as usual. Everyone stopped the work at hand and stood in place respectfully. The boss stood like an angry lion, standing on a high place and cursing. Luo Junhong, do you fucking know how to come back? This is really not what a boss should say to the employees. If he is so wrong, it is probably because the big business has failed. I'm in a good mood. The business boomed, which meant that the factory's capital chain was completely broken. The broken ship is about to sink. I'm too lazy to act. The state stipulates that employees have 3 days of bereavement leave after the death of their immediate relatives. My father just left. What's wrong with me asking for leave to deal with his future? The fake note has been sent to the personnel as soon as possible. The boss was so angry that he was provoked for the first time. You must get my consent to ask for leave. Have you asked me for your opinion? I faintly reminded him. The rules and regulations of the factory are clearly written, and the leave process is there. Bereavement leave only needs to be registered by the personnel office. Shut up, I have the final say in this factory. How dare you talk to me like that? It seems that Xiaoyang was right before. The old fried dough sticks that have been there for a long time are indeed hard wings. This sentence hurts not only me. There are many old employees in the factory, with more than 10 years of experience, with different expressions. There's nothing to say. It's useless to stay in the factory for the old fried dough sticks, who don't do their duty and their responsibilities. They will be fired. You pack up today and get out of here. Several old employees begged for mercy for me. Boss, Mr. Luo has been working in the factory for so long. Can you give him another chance? The boss exhaled in his nostrils. I gave him a chance. But this time, he made the biggest business a mess. It's so miserable that everyone can't even give out this year's year-end bonus. The year is coming, and it turns out that he came up with this idea. Take a blame and fire me, saving the year-end bonus of the whole factory employees. Make up for the shortage of liquidity, and work hard at the beginning of the year. I almost laughed out loud. How could he save for such a wolf-hearted boss in his previous life? No need to say I'll be fired. Mr. Luo, do you really want to leave? Several close colleagues came over, filled with indignation. I nodded. It's okay to leave, but you have to calculate the salary and compensation clearly. No reason cancellation without 1 month's notice in advance. 2N plus 1 compensation. It's 400,000 yuan in total. Please pay it to my salary card immediately. Everyone was stunned. The boss was the first to react with a pale face. Luo Junhong, do you think this is a way to get rich? Don't dream. Get out of here. I don't have a single point here. I knew for a long time that he would react like this, so I called the labor inspection brigade on the spot. After working in the factory for so long, everything was handled in accordance with the law. The 400,000 yuan was what I deserved. When the boss saw that I was serious, his arrogance quickly disappeared, and he began to play the emotional card. Mr. Luo, you also know the current situation in the factory. The loss of major customers is serious, and the liquidity in the factory is only this much. The rest will be used for next year's construction. If you take another 400,000 yuan, the factory may close down directly. Can we discuss this matter? 7. When the factory was profitable, I didn't see my salary increase. The factory went bankrupt. What's the matter with me? An employee who is about to be fired. I refused the proposal of mediation with an expressionless face. This factory was built by you, and you can bear to watch it close down? I have always regarded you as a brother. Now you are going to leave at the most critical time. Do you have any conscience? Change the trick. Do you want to blame me from the moral high point? I was not moved, and directly played the recording of the call when he scolded me. I have been here for a long time, but I have always been an ordinary employee. I dare not be your brother. When my father had just passed away, and was on normal bereavement leave, he cursed at me with such vicious words, which was not humane at all. All the employees present were silent. The boss couldn't come down from the stage. He blushed and couldn't say a word. The people from the labor supervision brigade arrived, briefly checked the contract and the basic information, and asked us to follow the law. After the compensation of 400,000 yuan arrived, I packed up and left on the spot. The boss was so angry that he cursed me behind my back. Luo Junhong, you have offended me, and I won't let you feel better. Our industry is not big, and the boss turns around and slanders me in various factories. He said that I didn't have a job, and was not responsible. He didn't listen to the leader's command, and often retorted his superiors. Finally, he resigned because of causing significant losses to the factory. These words were all passed on to me by my close colleagues. They are also old employees. The rabbit died and the fox died sadly. Their hearts were half cold and they fought for me. Mr. Luo, you have been single-minded for the good of the factory for 20 years, and we all see it. Boss, how can he insult and frame you like this? My wife is even more worried. Junhong, how will you find a job in the future? I waved my hand indifferently, holding 400,000 yuan in my hand. It doesn't matter if I take a break for a while. In my previous life, I was busy with work and neglected my family, who had always loved me and protected me. I just took this opportunity to accompany them more. My son's relationship with me was more close than before, and he kissed me on the cheek. Dad, you said to accompany me more often. You didn't lie to me this time. In my spare time, I also went to the hospital for a comprehensive examination. In his previous life, he often stayed up late and blocked the wine for his boss. He got liver cancer in middle age, and it was not good to lie in the hospital bed and die. Fortunately, the current physical examination results are normal, and all indicators are normal. That my wife touched my head and gave birth to a lot of gray hair. She said distressedly, "Your job is not easy to do. It's hard, tiring, and you don't have money. You should have resigned long ago. Have a good rest." My life is calm and leisurely, but the news from the other end is flying to me one by one. There is no business in the factory at all. We haven't started work for 3 weeks. Staying at the workplace every day and doing nothing. The boss took the opportunity to hire several people today. Mr. Luo, I'm not afraid of your jokes. I'm looking forward to being fired every day. At least I can get some compensation. The factory has been in arrears for 2 months, Luo Gong. It's really wise for you to take the compensation and leave. I raised the corners of my lips and typed a line of words. What about you? When are you going to leave? The news from that end came back quickly. Resign today. Once wages begin to be in arrears, more and more employees will resign. No one can use it. Even if it is forced to get the business, it can't deliver the order. This has become an unsolvable vicious circle. The boss soon appeared at my door. The man looked tired and lost the boss's style in the past. Mr. Luo Xiao Luo, I beg you to help me for the sake of the past. 8. The boss didn't ask for anything else, just asked me to go back to the factory. You don't have to do any work. As long as you stay in the factory, that group of people will have the backbone and will not break up easily. In addition, customers will also trust us more. After so many years of technical work, I have had a basic trust from customers. The customers who have been attracted by the boss these days, when they heard that I had left the company, they were reluctant to sign a contract and place an order. Only then did he realize the seriousness of the problem. Well, you go back with me, and I'll give you a raise. It's really interesting. I worked as a cow and a horse for 20 years in my previous life, and my salary is not as good as that of an apprentice who has just entered the factory. This time I took the initiative to quit, but he offered to raise my salary to attract me back. I didn't take a stand. The boss was so nervous that he bent down and rubbed his hands back and forth. I don't have enough money now, and the employee's salary has been in arrears for several months. In this way, I'll double it for you, 20,000 yuan. I smiled softly and said, it's the same as Xiao Yang's salary before. The boss immediately stretched out 3 fingers. 3 times, I can only give this number at most. If it's more I've even sold the car now. I agreed to his request, but put forward another condition, to make up all the wages owed to the employees. The rest of the employees in the factory were overjoyed, and held a warm welcome ceremony for me. Only the boss's face was gloomy and his mood was extremely bad. In order to make up for the salary arrears in the past few months, he had to sell a villa under his name. It was strange that he was in a good mood. Besides, the employees below know that I won the salary for them, and they only accept my kindness openly and secretly. The boss is so stingy that how can he be willing? He quickly came out with a moth. Mr. Luo, do we still have the same work schedule as before? I look strange. Boss, it's not what you said. I don't have to do anything when I come back this time. I just act as a mascot. We agreed to lie flat, that is lie flat. I used to work overtime every day, and got 10,000 yuan. Now I sit on the bench every day and get off work on time. And my salary has tripled. The boss is not happy, and I am very satisfied. But he had no choice but to drink desperately at the wine table, and finally got a small order. The other customer named Luo Gong to take the seat, and he can't live without me. The employees began to start production in place. I didn't worry as much as I used to, staring at the operation process all day and night. Anyway, what should be messed up will always be messed up. It was not until 3 months later that the order began to be delivered. The first wave of funds returned to the cage, and the numbers on the books continued to increase, and the boss immediately couldn't sit still. Mr. Luo, the current situation in the factory is difficult. As the highest paid employee, you have not made any special contribution. You should share the worries of the factory. There is no consent from the trade union at all, and there is no reason. The boss lowered my salary to the minimum wage in the city. He was quite proud when he walked past me. Luo Junhong, the factory's difficulties have passed, and I don't need you anymore. I nodded. Congratulations, do you want to fire me again? The boss shook his head. I'm not that stupid. I won't give you a penny again. I will spend you until you can't stand it. I also laughed with him. Well, I want to see who can't stand it first. The boss has only been staring at me during this period, and has not noticed that the process of the frontline workers operating the machine is different at all. The machine that was faulty by Xiao Yang may be able to cope with small-scale production, but it can't cope with the current production at all. The parts produced do not meet the qualification requirements, and it is found that they can be scrapped and remade before leaving the factory. However, the old employees who were originally in charge of the inspection have left in the past few months, and the boss has not recruited new inspectors in order to save money. Unqualified parts are smoothly delivered to the assembly department, assembled finished products, and delivered out of the warehouse. How can the final product be qualified? It will be discovered sooner or later. When the boss rushed into the factory in anger, I probably guessed that the storm was coming soon. 9. He ordered all the personnel to stop working. The boss rushed to the sample room out of the warehouse, picked up a finished bearing, took a tool and sat down on the ground. How can it be? There are errors and they are all scraps. The boss kept saying, 20,000 pieces, it's over, it's all bad and garbage. The employee didn't know why and secretly asked me, Boss, this is... I narrowed my eyes and said, it's just a liquidated damages of 10 times the amount of the contract, about more than 20 million yuan. Hiss, more than 20 million. Isn't our factory going to close down? I blinked and didn't say much. The news quickly spread among employees. Within a week, 276 employees left, nearly 250 people. The huge factory suddenly became empty. The boss tried his best, but he still couldn't get the other party's understanding. All the employees under him have run away, which means that there is no way to remake a batch of products and continue to fulfill the contract. There is no other way but to lose money and terminate the contract. The boss soon became the boss. As soon as he stepped into the factory, he was immediately surrounded by the remaining employees who did not receive their wages. Chen Jianming, send me this month's salary quickly. Right, I have old and young. I believe you will stay until the end. If you don't give it, I will never let you go if I can't live. Chen Jianming promised. I have filed for bankruptcy. The factory and the machines were all taken out to the auction to pay off the debt. Now there is really no money. How can you have no money, you black-hearted boss? When the factory was profitable, you bought yourself a car and a house. Now you lose money and want to run away. Ba lao lai, you don't have to die. Through the angry crowd, I can vaguely see Chen Jianming's current embarrassment. Half of his head turned white, his beard was shaggy, and his eyes were covered with dark blue. He was surrounded so much that he could not breathe. His distant eyes looked at me, and his eyes lit up. Xiao Luo Junhong, help me. Several colleagues looked over along the line of sight and couldn't breathe. You still have the face to call Luo Gong. He was cheated by you. An old man who has worked for 20 years will be fired, if he says he will be fired. Later he licked his face to call people back, but he faked his power. That's right, if I had known, I should have listened to Luo Gong's advice and left early. I wouldn't even have been able to get the last month's salary. Damn Lao Lai, I really can't wait to beat him to death. Chen Jianming chilled the hearts of all employees, and it is not surprising to end up like this. But at least we worked together, and I showed him the last way. If you don't want to be an old man, you can sell the gold bars we bought 18 years ago. 18 years ago, it was the second year of the factory's establishment. The business has just begun, the factory is booming, and we are still young. Chen Jianming queued up at the bank early in the morning and bought 20 gold bars. This is the year-end bonus for you this year, and it is also a birthday gift for your 20th birthday. At that time, I thought that the gold bar would be preserved for a long time and could add value. So I gave him 10 yuan back. 10 yuan for each of us. There is no such stupid employee. The boss doesn't even want money for you. Chen Jianming laughed happily at that time. He dug a hole under the front door plate of the factory and put his 10 gold bars in it. Bless us to make money all the time and become big bosses as soon as possible. I guess he has forgotten these long ago. Sure enough, Chen Jianming shivered and his eyes became complicated. The lips squeaked a few times before opening his mouth with difficulty. Wait a minute, everyone. I'll pay you back the salary you owe right away. After the bankruptcy liquidation, the factory was sealed. The boss became an ordinary person, but at least he didn't become an old man. On the day of the lockdown, I couldn't help going to the scene. Chen Jianming was also there. He didn't dare to look into my eyes and lowered his head and whispered, I'm sorry. It doesn't matter. I picked up my son and turned around to go home. Career only accounts for a small part of my life, and I still have a happy family. This is the most important thing. The full text is finished.